I had always thought that wringing one's hands was a fictional gesture, the obscure outcome perhaps of some medieval ritual. But as I took to the woods for a spell of despair and desperate meditation, this was the gesture, "Look, Lord, at these chains," that would have come nearest to the mute expression of my mood. Had Charlotte been Valeria, I would have known how to handle the situation, and handle is the word I want. In the good old days, by merely twisting fat Valechka's brittle wrist, the one she had fallen upon from a bicycle, I could make her change her mind instantly. But anything of the sort in regard to Charlotte was unthinkable. Bland American Charlotte frightened me. My light-hearted dream of controlling her through her passion for me was all wrong. I dared not do anything to spoil the image of me she had set up to adore. I had toadied to her when she was the awesome duenna of my darling, and a grovelling something still persisted in my attitude toward her. The only ace I held was her ignorance of my monstrous love for her Lo. She had been annoyed by Lo's liking me, but my feelings she could not divine. To Valeria I might have said, "Look here, you fat fool, c'est moi qui décide what is good for Dolores Humbert." To Charlotte I could not even say, with ingratiating calm, "Excuse me, my dear, I disagree. Let us give the child one more chance. Let me be her private tutor for a year or so. You once told me yourself." In fact, I could not say anything at all to Charlotte about the child without giving myself away. Oh, you cannot imagine, as I had never imagined, what these women of principle are. Charlotte, who did not notice the falsity of all the everyday conventions and rules of behaviour and foods and books and people she doted upon, would distinguish at once a false intonation in anything I might say with a view to keeping Lo near. She was like a musician who may be an odious vulgarian in ordinary life, devoid of tact and taste, but who will hear a false note in music with diabolical accuracy of judgment. To break Charlotte's will, I would have to break her heart. If I broke her heart, her image of me would break too. If I said, "Either I have my way with Lolita, and you help me keep the matter quiet, or we part at once," she would have turned as pale as a woman of clouded glass, and slowly replied, "All right. Whatever you add or retract, this is the end." And the end it would be. Such, then, was the mess. I remember reaching the parking area and pumping a handful of rust-tasting water and drinking it as avidly as if it could give me magic wisdom, youth, freedom, a tiny concubine. For a while, purple-robed, heel dangling, I sat on the edge of one of the rude tables under the whooshing pines. In the middle distance, two little maidens in shorts and halters came out of a sun-dappled privy marked women. Gum-chewing Mabel, or Mabel's understudy, laboriously, absent-mindedly straddled a bicycle, and Marion, shaking her hair because of the flies, settled behind, legs wide apart, and wobbling they slowly, absently merged with the light and shade. Lolita, father and daughter melting into these woods. The natural solution was to destroy Mrs. Humbert. But how? No man can bring about the perfect murder. Chance, however, can do it. There was the famous dispatch of a Madame Lecour in Arles, southern France, at the close of the last century. An unidentified bearded six-footer, who, it was later conjectured, had been the lady's secret lover, walked up to her in a crowded street soon after her marriage to Colonel Lecour, and mortally stabbed her in the back 3 times, while the colonel, a small bulldog of a man, hung on to the murderer's arm. By a miraculous and beautiful coincidence, right at the moment when the operator was in the act of loosening the angry little husband's jaws, while several onlookers were closing in upon the group, a cranky Italian in the house nearest to the scene set off by sheer accident some kind of explosive he was tinkering with, and immediately the street was turned into a pandemonium of smoke, falling bricks, and running people. The explosion hurt no one, except that it knocked out game Colonel Lecour. But the lady's vengeful lover ran when the others ran, and lived happily ever after. Now look what happens when the operator himself plans a perfect removal. I walked down to Hourglass Lake. The spot from which we and a few other nice couples, the Farlows, the Chatfields, bathed, was a kind of small cove. My Charlotte liked it because it was almost a private beach. The main bathing facilities, or drowning facilities, as the Ramsdale Journal had had occasion to say, were in the left eastern part of the Hourglass, and could not be seen from our covelet. To our right, the pines soon gave way to a curve of marshland which turned again into forest on the opposite side. I sat down beside my wife so noiselessly that she started. "Shall we go in?" she asked. "We shall in a minute. Let me follow a train of thought." I thought. More than a minute passed. "All right, come on." Was I on that train? "You certainly were." "I hope so," said Charlotte, entering the water. It soon reached the goose-flesh of her thick thighs, and then, joining her outstretched hands, shutting her mouth tight, very plain-faced in her black rubber headgear, Charlotte flung herself forward with a great splash. Slowly we swam out into the shimmer of the lake. On the opposite bank, at least 1,000 paces away, if one could walk across water, I could make out the tiny figures of 2 men working like beavers on their stretch of shore. I knew exactly who they were. A retired policeman of Polish descent, and the retired plumber who owned most of the timber on that side of the lake. I also knew they were engaged in building, just for the dismal fun of the thing, a wharf. The knocks that reached us seemed so much bigger than what could be distinguished of those dwarves' arms and tools. Indeed, one suspected the director of those acrosonic effects to have been at odds with the puppet master, especially since the hefty crack of each diminutive blow lagged behind its visual version. The short white sand strip of our beach, from which by now we had gone a little way to reach deep water, was empty on weekday mornings. There was nobody around except those 2 tiny, very busy figures on the opposite side, and a dark red private plane that droned overhead and then disappeared in the blue. The setting was really perfect for a brisk, bubbling murder. And here was the subtle point. The man of law and the man of water were just near enough to witness an accident and just far enough not to observe a crime. They were near enough to hear a distracted bather thrashing about and bellowing for somebody to come and help him save his drowning wife, and they were too far to distinguish, if they happened to look too soon, that the anything but distracted swimmer was finishing to tread his wife underfoot.